So before we get started, I have 5 pieces of advice that might save your life and could help save the planet too. Yep, I'm coming in hot. Take the lid off your coffee cup, fix that leak in your house, take your shoes off when you get home, vote with your groceries, and say thank you. Those things I just said don't sound like medical advice, do they? No, they sound like things like a grandma might tell you to do, but like a weird grandma. No shoes in the house. Come in, I made dumplings. You're too thin. I'm Dr. Zandra Palma, and I am a weird grandma. Or an aspiring one, maybe, because those are the kinds of things I find myself saying to my patients all the time. Quítate la tapa del café, mija. I wasn't always like this. I trained actually very conventionally and studied in the tallest ivory towers, and then I had a little look around the dumpster fire that is US conventional medicine during my residencies, and I decided to veer off the beaten path a bit. So now I practice functional medicine with a focus on environmental medicine. So today you're gonna learn what they didn't teach me at Harvard and Columbia. What I love about environmental medicine is that it's premised on the idea that to return somebody to health, you don't always have to give them a medicine or do a procedure. Sometimes the most elegant and direct solution isn't to add something on top. It's simply to take something away. And that's my approach when I treat the immune system. I find the thing that was hindering the immune system's ability to function properly, and I take it out of the immune system's way. I am like that guy who has tweezers when you have a splinter in your foot at a dance party. But teach a man to tweeze. In my practice, I look really closely at the immune system, so close that I count different subtypes of immune cells in my patients. I assure you, no doctor has ever done that for you. No normal doctor, anyway. And there are a lot of different types of immune cells, all with different roles. So I'm looking to see whether that army is working in the coordinated way that it's supposed to, with enough generals and lieutenants over here, enough snipers in this tower, some ribbon dancers on deck 5, to keep the vibes high. I don't know. I think I'll give a talk on military strategy next year. I actually really do like the analogy of an army for the immune system, though, because it also gives you an idea of what happens when it fails. If any of those specialists don't do their jobs right, you get poor immunity. That's like having a weak army, where you can't protect yourself from viral attack or get rid of early cancer cells. Or you get autoimmunity. That's like friendly fire when your army turns against you and your immune cells attack your own tissues. Or you get allergies, and it's possible and common to have all 3. One of the cell types I count are called natural killer cells. They're kind of like the special forces of the immune system. When something's tagged for destruction, like a virus-infected cell or a cancer cell, natural killer cells are the guys who go in the night and take them out. And I decided to run the test on myself at some point around 2019, and I was doing pretty well at the time. I had been practicing functional medicine for a couple of years already, so I didn't eat sugar, grains, gluten, or dairy. I was exercising 5 times a week, sleeping 7 hours a night, meditating regularly, all those things. All the things doctors tell you to do, but you guys never do. I was doing them. So I was pretty sure that my natural killer cells would come back in optimal range. The lab says that anything above 60 natural killer cells per microliter of blood is normal, but shooting for lab normal is a little bit like shooting for a C average, so I prefer to see them a bit higher. 150 is my cutoff for optimal. So I got my results. 34. Okay, I know everybody has days where their body feels out of their control, but I went to so much school and turned down so many slices of pizza, so I wouldn't have to have those days anymore. And that's the thing. A lot of people living with this baseline level of immune dysfunction think they're doing everything right, just like I did. Most of my patients, in fact, have similar numbers when we start working together, and a lot of them look and feel normal. But if you're eating, sleeping, moving, and meditating almost perfectly, how could your numbers still look that bad? What are these invisible factors that are damaging the immune systems of otherwise healthy people? Weird grandma enemy number 1, the coffee lid. See, the lids on coffee cups contain plasticizer chemicals called bisphenols. The most famous one is BPA. You've probably heard of it. But there are other the BP stands for bisphenol, but there are other BPs too. There's BPS, BPZ. So even if this coffee lid says that it's BPA-free, it doesn't mean that it's bisphenol-free. There's a group called EFSA, or the European Food Safety Authority, a bit like a European FDA. And they recently updated their recommendation on the safety of BPA. And in their draft opinion, they state that they based that decision on the toxicity of BPA to the immune system specifically. BPA has a lot of negative effects on a lot of body systems. You've probably read things in the news, like it causes infertility, it wrecks your hormones, it's linked to diabetes, it disrupts fetal development, it's linked to obesity. My patients always start listening when I say that one. But of all the research that EFSA looked at, they thought that the most critical effect was that BPA substantially increased people's Th17 cells. Th17 cells are a close cousin of our old friend natural killer cells, but they have some character flaws. They're kind of traitors, and when they get excited, they like to mutiny. Overactivity of Th17 cells leads to autoimmunity, when your immune system attacks your own body. So, given that very undesirable effect of BPA, EFSA lowered the tolerable daily intake, the amount that they say is safe to ingest in a day. And they lowered it to 0.04 nanograms of BPA per kilogram of body weight. So for a 65 kilogram adult, that's 2.6 nanograms. This just happened in 2022. And before that, the last time that EFSA had set a tolerable daily intake for BPA was 2015. Guess how much lower the new tolerable daily intake is than the last one was? Like half as much? 1/10? It was 100,000 times lower. Just a cool 100,000 times. Imagine if I built a roller coaster and I tell you, we got an inspector, everything checks out, it's totally safe. And the big drop is only like 10 meters. Could you take a ride on it with me? Come on. And I convince you. And as we're mounting the top of the first climb, oh, inspector calls back. I'm so sorry. Did I say 10 meters? No, I'm sorry. No, the drop is actually 1 million meters. It's a 1 million meter drop. Yeah. No, this roller coaster is not safe at all. No hands. So, let's compare the new tolerable daily intake of BPA for an average adult, 2.6 nanograms, to what you might get from this coffee lid. We're going to use a close proxy because there aren't good experimental data from coffee lids, but there are from aluminum cans. Now, most people don't know that these cans are lined with plastic on the inside. So just remember, when you reach for a can of soda, from a plasticizer perspective, it's not that different from a bottle of soda. So we're going to use an experiment that looked at coffee drinks in that type of aluminum can. And full disclosure, it's an older study. It's from 2002. So what we don't know is whether manufacturing practices around BPA have changed since then. But when I had a look around beverage companies, the big guys were actually very transparent about admitting that they still use BPA in these linings. So in the experiment we're using, an average of 75 nanograms of BPA per milliliter of coffee migrated into the drink. And interestingly, the more caffeine that was in the coffee, the more BPA migrated into it. And we know about other factors that can increase BPA migration as well, like whether the receiving substance is salty, hot, acidic, or wet. So in our imaginary coffee with the lid, in our thought experiment, that coffee is presumably both hot and wet. So if we do a little math, and I know nobody likes math, just stick with me. Stay with me, I will give you all stickers later. We still do stickers. So 75 nanograms of BPA per milliliter of coffee times a 350 milliliter coffee. That's about the size of a tall at Starbucks. I know only Americans drink this much coffee. It should have 26,625 nanograms of BPA in it. That is 10,000 times the amount that EFSA now says is safe for a 65 kilogram adult to consume in a day. That amount of bisphenol exposure on a daily basis could mean the difference between you developing hair loss and not. So just take that lid off. The logic of environmental medicine is pretty simple, right? That things that are in your immediate environment can make you sick. But sometimes the thing that made you sick isn't in your immediate environment anymore. Exposure to indoor molds, for example, even in the distant past, can make you very sick in the present. And it's something I see in my practice every day. And yes, it's treatable. But even better, it's preventable. How do you prevent exposure to indoor molds? Weird grandma knows. You fix that leak in your house. Molds excrete these biotoxins called mycotoxins. It's kind of like their evolutionary defense mechanism. Mycotoxins help mold vie for space and nutrition and fight with other organisms, but unfortunately for us, they're incredibly toxic to human health, and they tend to persist in the body for decades. A person can still have debilitating chronic fatigue from a moldy home they lived in 30 years ago. Just medically speaking, that's worse than like your most toxic ex. When I want to see if a person has mold toxins stored in their body, I use a urine test. My favorite one tests for 5 types of mycotoxins: ochratoxin, aflatoxin, trichothecenes, gliotoxin, and zealrinone. Of those 5 types, every single one is toxic to the immune system. And there are other mycotoxins that are immunotoxic as well, like citrinin, deoxynivalenol, mycophenolic acid, and a toxin from black mold called cyclosporin. If you recognize that name, it's because we actually use cyclosporin as an immunosuppressive drug in transplant medicine. That's right, this mold toxin is so good at shutting the immune system down that we turned it into a medicine to give to transplant patients so their body won't reject the transplanted organs. And even though we're here to talk about the immune system, it's worth mentioning that molds hit other body systems hard as well, including the brain. Fun fact, some historians have posited that the Salem witch trials happened because a mold called ergot blighted the rye crop of the town. So mold can both tank your natural killer cells and make you see the devil with Goody Proctor. Fantastic fungi Salem. Special Victims Unit. So how do molds get into us? We do get some exposure from certain foods, like grains and dairy, but the vast majority of people who are sick with mycotoxins acquired that excessive body burden of them from spores in indoor air, most often the air in their own homes. So taking care of any leaks and water damage around your house is one of the most important things you can do to keep your body and mind healthy. And if you remember one thing from this talk, let it be this: never clean mold with bleach. Never clean mold with bleach. When you put the two together, it creates a super toxin called a chlorinated hydrocarbon that's capable of damaging DNA. So just use some apple cider vinegar mixed with water instead. And while we're doing some light housework, it's probably worth talking about the chemicals in your home environment. I'm sure you're not surprised to hear that herbicides and pesticides can lower your natural killer cells. I mean, they were designed to kill other organisms. But you might be surprised that you're being exposed to them in your living room. But how are they getting there? Nobody's spraying weed killer on their coffee table. They're being tracked in on our shoes. A study from the American Chemical Society found that the most significant factor affecting herbicide residue levels inside the home was removal of shoes at the door. Weird grandma was right. She told me to stop licking the grass. Of course, these things are also sprayed all over the crops we eat. And the animals that we eat are filled with agricultural chemicals too, because they were fed on crops that were sprayed. Now, most herbicides and pesticides can be avoided by choosing to buy certified organic food. And I know, you're thinking that sounds expensive. It is more expensive. And listen, I would prefer to stand up here and just give you advice that doesn't cost you anything, but this one is so critically important that I'd be a bad doctor if I left it out. See, buying organic food isn't just protecting you, it's casting a vote with your money. A shift in consumer behaviors and demand pressures on food producers could change how immune-disrupting chemicals are used in agriculture, and it can probably do it before a change in regulatory policies can. You know, I like what I said so much, I'm gonna say it again. A shift and a change in the choices that you make when you buy food will change how food producers use chemicals that make people sick before legislation will. So by choosing to buy the certified organic strawberries instead of the sprayed ones, you're not just protecting yourself and your family, you're taking steps to protect the whole community. You're casting a vote with your groceries. You're shaping the future of agriculture. And if enough of us vote with our groceries, we might just save the planet. And that brings me to my last tip for a healthy immune system. I hate to sound like a yoga brand's Instagram feed, but it's gratitude. Gratitude and other positive psychological states like self-compassion can actually alter the pro-inflammatory immune response and change the course of autoimmune disease. And to prove that it works, I'm going to say thank you to you. Is it working? Am I glowing yet? I must be, you guys are clapping. No, truly, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, and thank you for caring enough about your own health to participate in maybe saving the planet. I'm gonna boil it down to a mantra for you. Clean water, clean air, clean food. The immune system is the welcome committee of the body, so to keep it healthy, we have to manage the inputs. If there's only one thing I can leave you with, let it be that. Clean water, clean air, clean food. And thank you.